Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection. All while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to another installment of Positive Recovery MD, the podcast with the most awesome guest today, Clifton Gillock, who is co-founder at KICPOPS, KICPOPS, and he's actually an executive committee board member at Archway Academy. KICPOPS is a local Houston popsicle company that uses locally sourced, healthy, natural products that is unbelievably tasty. I remember having your pops at one of our events, or maybe you just came and gave it to us once, but I could not get enough. And I think I pretended that I didn't get one. I got another one and it was so good. It was so good. And I totally forgot about how good they were. And I know anybody from, I know we have some listeners in other states and they can order it online. I don't know how that's shipped, but obviously this is not an infomercial. I want to get into the nuts and bolts of sort of you. So let us know what happened or what it was like, what happened and what it's like now.
Yeah. So what it was like, is pretty similar to many experiences that other opiate addicts have had. Like I started using drugs in high school age, somewhere around there, alcohol, on the weekends. And progressively over the course of like almost a decade, it just got worse and worse. And eventually prescription painkillers made their entrance into my life. And, from that point on, it just completely wrecked, every aspect of my life, whether that was academics, sports, relationships, mental health, my physical health, it took everything. What happened was I reached a point, I actually remember the day, and I was sleeping on the floor at a friend's apartment and been doing that for a while. I don't even know how long. And it was like one of those aha moments that everyone talks about, and it's like, usually when I would reach out to my parents or reach out for help, it was like a last resort. I was out of money. I was in jail. Something like that had happened. And all those things did happen and never got me sober. But this one particular morning, I woke up, I had work, I had money. And instead of going straight to my drug dealer's house, I called my mom and asked for help. And I still to this day, don't even know why I did that. But that was like the beginning of what I consider my actual journey into sobriety. I had participated in APG groups. I actually attended Archway Academy when I was in high school. And for me personally, I wasn't there yet. My addiction hadn't taken enough and hadn't gotten bad enough for myself to want change.
Yeah. Your story is actually more common than people realize because most people don't get it at the first encounter with treatment, but seeds are planted and you're never the same person after a medical intervention. And I use that term loosely because it could have just been with a counselor that didn't use medicine or an alternative peer group, which you were exposed to, or 12-step meetings or anything like that, because it takes a while for things that we plant to grow, whether it's a literal field or it's metaphorical, right? We have to hear things about 7 times before we're motivated to buy something. And we need to try to quit something about 7 times before we're actually successful. And I think, addiction is the same way. You were introduced to a solution of sorts and you didn't lose everything. I mean, you weren't living large. You were living on the floor of a friend's house. So obviously, look at you now. Things could have been a lot better, but I do think that your story, I think for listeners, I think it's important to realize treatment isn't a failure if there's not a cure after the first or second or third encounter, because we manage this chronic disease and it never ends. So you're doing great now. You could have relapsed tonight just as easily as you could have gotten well at any point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, it was like you mentioned planting the seed. And for me, like along the way over those next 10 years, and one of those full circle type of moments, the first experience I actually had with, AA recovery and everything, you were the doctor that treated me. I don't know if you remember that back in like, I don't even know what year that was, 2006, something like that.
Yeah, I was still a little wet behind my ears myself, but yeah.
Yeah. And so, but it did plant that seed. And, along the course of the 10 years after that, where things just got worse and worse, I told myself, the answer is sobriety, but I put that option off as long as I possibly could, because it came down to, it was either prison, death, or sobriety. And at that point, the right option is pretty clear, and it was for a long time, but you're stuck in this delusion and like this middle headspace to where it's like, it's so easy. All I had to do was take a step in the opposite direction, one step, and my life would change forever. But it was absolutely the hardest thing I ever had to do.
It is. It's a huge step. Were you using anything else besides opioids?
I was using everything over the course of, from when I was about 15 till I got sober. How old was I? Got sober, 26, 27, something like that. So I'd used just about everything. But, when people ask, like opioids was my drug of choice.
So at the end, was it just opioids you were physically addicted to, or was it a combo?
No, it was like physically, it was just opioids. And so that was part of the problem by that time, with finances and everything like that. It's like that, it was the only thing I was doing, and I didn't care about anything else at that point either.
Yeah. And the reason I asked is because I too was on everything but roller skates most of the time, but opioids were the thing that I just couldn't not do. So it was like our drug of no choice. And the way I describe it, I'm sure you can relate, is that it wasn't trying to get high. It wasn't like trying to feel, it was trying to avoid feeling like the worst ever. It was just avoiding shit. So it's like a prison of sorts, right? And wanting to get out is like natural, right? But being able to take that first step, it's like the longest chasm, right? Everything is just so magnified because you're in pain all the time.
It's not funny, but it's like one of those things that like now, it's 6-something years sober, I look back at and talk to my family and my sister, my mom and stuff about it. And it's like, there were times over the course of the years where they approach me like, something's wrong, like you're high right now. And the majority of the time it was because I wasn't high, because that's how sick I was getting when I wasn't using.
Oh, I thought you were going to do what I did. And I convinced everybody I had narcolepsy.
No, definitely never did that.
All right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. It sucks, the withdrawal. That's so funny. You're right. Look, it's not funny. It's sad. But if it wasn't a little funny, if we couldn't laugh at it, that'd be really painful. But yeah, so keep going. This is great.
Yeah. And so then, that's not where that moment that I just spoke about was not where I actually finally found long-term sobriety. I had a couple of relapses in between, but essentially I then that was the moment I really started taking suggestions. That's what changed in that moment. And when I went to treatment that time, you need to go to sober living, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I said, okay, my first, try and treatment, whatever they were telling me to do, I wanted to do the opposite. And at this point, things had gotten so bad, I just started taking recommendations because I realized what I thought was best was the complete opposite. So that's when things started to change. Unfortunately, life comes up, I started working, I started doing all these things, and sobriety came last again, and eventually led me into another relapse, to where because of that relapse and because of my behavior, I actually had violated probation. And so show up one day, actually after I'd gone back to treatment, a couple of days after I'd gotten out, to my probation officer, and they essentially sentenced me to YMAC, which is Harris County's residential treatment program, if you even want to call it that. And so I spent, I don't know, somewhere around a year, I think a little less there. And, that's where I, finally, I was able to be disconnected from the real world for an extended amount of time. And I was actually fortunate enough to be able to use that time, wisely and be productive and read books and work on recovery. And, it was definitely a really tough experience, but for me personally, it's exactly what I needed.
That's the system working.
Well, I was so fortunate that I had done it, because a lot of people, get thrown in there, they're withdrawing in there, whatever the, situation may be. I was fortunate enough to go to treatment for 30 days and then a few days later go and do that. So I had a complete different kind of middle approach and mental clarity than most people had, even if they weren't addicts or alcoholics that were there. I was able to accept the situation and while I was there and, really start towards changing my life.
In all of this, going in and out of treatment and things like that, you have this family who's supportive and around you and trying to get you help. Where were they at in all this? And, so often as parents, they try to avoid having their, child go into kind of like a YMAC type of thing or a court system type of treatment center. So how did they handle it? What was that like for them?
So what you said is like definitely very true for the most part of my story. And it's a pretty important part of my story. And I talked about this with some friends is like what essentially started this entire process was my mom joining her own 12-step support group. Because, over the course of the years, drug addicts are manipulative, and I could convince someone the sky was purple, it was just really insane. And once she started participating in Al-Anon is when things really started to change and get worse for me personally, because I was no longer able to tell her I had a flat tire and needed $200 or whatever the case may be, And so by the time this had happened, she kind of had started implementing some of those principles they teach you in Al-Anon. And I mean, it was absolutely the best thing for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, we tell people all the time that we recommend that the loved one goes to Al-Anon or Ar-Anon, one of the 12-step programs. And you might not like how they wind up coming out because they will not continue to put up with some of the same stuff once they have their black belt in Al-Anon or something. So
yeah, definitely. Well, and it was like one of those things that it's like, it's so hard, especially like, I just recently had a baby, which is like another gift of sobriety, and
congratulations.
Like, thank you.
Yeah.
It's like making me like, rethink, my experience and, how I treated my parents and things like that. And it's like, I can't imagine like what my parents went through. And it's got to be really hard to like make that disconnection to where like you're here for like, she was always there for me, like emotionally, and physically and all those sort of things. But, she really had to disconnect and like set some really hard boundaries. And I mean, we actually did a podcast not too long ago together. And like, she talked about that some, and, I'm sure that was like really hard for her. Cause I can't imagine, like I have this little girl now and I'm like, whatever she wants, she's getting, and I can't imagine how hard that's got to be to have a child that's going through something as difficult as I went through.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So you went in there, you were, doing what you were doing. Was that it for you? You came out, that was it?
I came out and I was cured. No. So, it was one of those things that I attribute to a lot of different things, like obviously the support system that AA has and the 12 steps, but a big thing for me too, is the higher power step. And one of those, moments of, if you want to call it a spiritual awakening type thing, I was actually in Harris County Jail before I got sent to YMAC and called my mom and we're talking about all sorts of things. And at one point in the conversation, she said to me, this isn't how I pictured it. I've been praying for years that, I know you're not on drugs and I know you're not going to die and I know that you're safe. This isn't how I pictured it, but those prayers came true. And like, I think we both like cried on the phone and, it was a really powerful moment. And over the course of the last like 5-6 years, it's like one of those things for me that's like always changing and I don't even try to understand it. For me personally, it's like nature is a huge part of that. You go out and sit out in a field and you suddenly realize like how insignificant you are.
Yeah, that's a great meditative exercise. And
yeah,
very touching. Yeah, it's so touching. A lot of parents are actually glad in some way if they have a child struggling with addiction. When they're finally in jail, they take a sigh of relief, believe it or not. And it's never something that one thinks about ahead of time, like, man, I can't wait for my kid to be in jail. But it's the safest of all alternatives. It just kind of shows you where you were. So what has it been like since?
I mean, since it's, to be completely honest, it's like been beyond my wildest dreams. It's like 7 years ago, you asked me like, what would the perfect life be to you? I would have told you something crazy. You know what I mean? Like this big house, lots of money, like traveling the world, this and that. And it's like, while I'm able to do some of those things like travel and stuff, it's like so much simpler than that. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to wake up every day, like stuck in my own mind, just chasing the next high, because for so long, like that's all it was. That's all I ever thought about. I woke up every morning, first thing on my mind, going to sleep. Last thing on my mind is what am I going to do tomorrow to get more? And it's just a really crazy like delusion to live in. It's like really hard to explain to anyone that hasn't experienced it,
Yeah. No, I tell people all the time, like when they're at the point of in treatment, early in recovery or whatever, I was like, if you write down like the 10 things that you would want in a year or 5 years, and I told you, don't sell yourself short, people always sell themselves short because it's, you just cannot fathom. Obviously there's more to you than KICPOPS, but did you come up with that idea? And let me set the stage, just because a lot of people look at a company like that and they think that you got from ground zero to where you are overnight. But I want you to open the hood and show us all the messiness.
Yeah, definitely. So it was originally my aunt's idea. And actually, it's kind of funny because she is a practicing lawyer. And so when I was in Harris County, she could come visit me for hours on end as my lawyer. And so we spent a lot of time together. She happens to also be in recovery. So I was able to like also spend that time, talking about the big book. And I remember my first, I don't know if it was I'll have to go pull it out somewhere. I still have it. I don't know if it was I guess it would have been my 90-day chip. She got one at a meeting, copied it on a Xerox machine and brought it to me on a piece of paper. Oh, and so that's my 90-day chip. Yeah. I mean, it's like one of those things that like, I had a lot of blessings like that. You know what I mean? Like most people aren't able to like visit with family. It gets cut off, and it's like, I don't think I ever realized like how much I actually appreciated that time till now. But anyways, we spent hours talking about it. I spent hours talking about it to other people in jail and they thought I was crazy. And, I got out and I was like, okay, I have to stay in Houston. At the time before I was arrested, I was living in Austin. So I was like, all right, they're making me stay in Houston now. I'll give it a shot, for 6 months. And that was 6.5 years ago. And the process from now until then has been, I tell people all the time, it's been absolutely the most challenging and hardest thing I've ever done other than getting sober, but also the most rewarding, and it's like, so it has a lot of similarities in the experience I had with getting sober. It's like, it was the hardest thing I ever did, but one of the most rewarding things I ever did. And the same thing goes for my business, and regardless of what we do on a day-to-day basis, it's been an awesome experience because I'm able to like give back to people that are newly sober and looking for a job and provide a safe space for them to be able to come work and, kind of find out who they are professionally.
What was your first recipe? What was it like buying the stuff? Where did you make it? What did it taste like?
Early on, we rented a commercial kitchen that was an old house they'd converted. And so the kitchen was about as big as this office area that I'm in right now. It was tiny. And we had so many different recipes and stuff that we'd gotten online. Once we'd been like, this needs to be a popsicle. And there were some really good ones that we made in that kitchen, but there were also some like really awful ones that we made in that kitchen.
What was the worst one?
It was like a brownie batter almond banana or something. And it just like, all those things sound great, but like this pop just did. I mean, it wasn't sweet enough. It did not taste great.
Did it taste like the color it was?
It kind of tasted like a really bitter, like power bar or something.
Oh, okay.
And so it's just like not something that like you're expecting when you're biting into a popsicle,
So what's the process of making a healthy popsicle? A lot of people don't know. So do you have a press? Do you have to heat stuff up first? Like, what do you do?
So each recipe is a little different. Sometimes it does require some heat to infuse, different herbs or anything that we may use. But I mean, it's fairly simple. It's essentially like creating a smoothie, but then we have commercial machines that freeze it. So our machine actually can do batches of 88 and freeze them in under 30 minutes.
Wow. Is it nitrogen? How does it freeze so quick?
So have you ever been to a grocery store and seen like they have those wine coolers? They'll cool your wine in real quick. It's a propylene glycol water solution that circulates around the molds and freezes them really quick.
I got sober before. I think that was,
so I wasn't drinking when my first experience. We'd go into the grocery store as kids and have contests how long we could keep our hands inside of them.
Yeah, you're younger than I am. I think all they had in the back for us was the bathroom.
But, since then too, like that tiny little small kitchen where we paid like an hourly rate, we were able to, build out our own 2,000 square foot commercial kitchen and office area. And, so we've been growing substantially every year. Two major things that set us back were Hurricane Harvey, because we were building our kitchen. And when that happened, all the permitting processes, flooded restaurants got pushed to the front of the line so they could get reopened. And so it took us, I think, almost 2 years to like build and get that facility permitted. It was insane. And then obviously COVID's been, super tough on a business like ours that previously heavily relied on public events, corporate events, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. So thank God things have been loosening up even with the Omicron, or I like to call it the Omicron prime. Man, I had that. It was rough.
I don't know which one I had, but I had it as well. But part of the whole experience through COVID was, while it was like really tough for us financially, it was also like a moment for us, and they talk about taking moments like this in sobriety as well. I mean, it's like, it works in business too. It's like, it was a moment for us to kind of pause, like take our breath and like reorganize and strategize how we wanted to move forward in the future. And so far it's worked out well.
So that's really cool. If people wanted to, we'll do this again at the end, but if people wanted to order your popsicles, what's the process?
So the easiest way is for anyone in Texas. There is a company that we have partnered with called GoPuff, which is a delivery app, and they have micro fulfillment centers all across the state. And so we're in the San Antonio, Dallas, Austin, New Braunfels, Denton, Fort Worth, and Houston markets.
People from out of state order?
It gets complicated. They can, but with shipping in dry ice, sometimes most don't find it, If they really want to try it, we can do it. But, it ends up being kind of costly with dry ice and next day shipping.
Yeah. So it's probably, if you live out of state, it's probably better to get on a plane or rent a car and get a ton of them and then drive them back.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions that are fun. Just answer whatever comes to your head. So the first one would be, what is your favorite sound?
My favorite sound? My wife would probably die laughing if she heard me say this, but when electronics turn on and the sounds they make, like if you turn on your computer and it's like dun dun, like I love those sounds. And I'm always curious, like how much time did Microsoft put into like the Windows start sound? Because it's so like soothing to me,
Oh, you're right. That is awesome. I didn't even think about that as an option. What's your least favorite sound?
My least favorite sound is probably traffic.
Okay. And what's your favorite word?
My favorite word, maybe peace.
And least favorite word?
Chaos.
Like, what are you passionate about? What gets your motor going?
It changes. And I think that's one of those things with like the obsession that like I'm now able to channel that same obsession into, like productive things. But personally, like I'm really passionate about, to put it simply, because it can apply to a lot of different things, is growth, whether that's my business or helping others, or, growing myself mentally and physically. Like it's something that like, I just love watching, even if it's other people.
That's awesome. What turns you off?
Complaining.
And in an alternate universe, what would you love to have tried doing for a vocation?
I tried it briefly, but anything music related. I have a whole lot of respect for musicians, because it's like there's so many that can play so many different instruments. And I mean, it's just incredible. And it's like something I tried for like a week when I was a kid that I really wish I had the talent to do.
Yeah. I think it's like 10% talent, 90% perspiration. It's like if you put 10,000 hours in anything, that's like the tipping point where you can become expert.
Right.
I'm with you. I can play the drums. I can't read music. For me, looking at that shit was always like, hieroglyphics. And
yeah, same.
I can listen to stuff and tinker around, but so drums suit me because I think if you bang loud enough, people just think you're playing something. Okay. What vocation would you loathe doing if, say, you had to do for the rest of your life?
I don't think, I'm sure there's one somewhere, but I've, over the course of, since I started working when I was like 15 or 16, had a whole lot of experience doing different things, everything from, building rotary hoses for, oil fields, to your average construction, to customer service jobs, to, now running my own business, which is essentially like almost all of those things combined, because I wear all the hats. I think for me, it would be just doing one thing. Like, I don't know if I could see myself in a role where I'm just doing one thing all the time consistently. Like for me, that's just not something I think I would be very effective at doing, and I would get burnt out and bored. And that's why, like, I think I thrive as a business owner, because I do a million different things every day.
That's awesome. Okay. So assuming there's a God, when you die and you're at the pearly gates waiting to get in, the gated community, as I like to call it, what would you like to hear come out of God's mouth?
Welcome to the duck pond.
The duck pond. Oh yeah.
I'm a huge hunter and fisher. So like, I imagine that like the gates open and it's just like this wide, vast, marshy area out in nature.
That's awesome. That's what it'll be like for you.
Yeah.
God's listening. All right.
That's like one of the things that I have a lot of friends that are in sobriety that hunt and fish too. And it's like one of those things where we are like really not only able to connect with one another on like a deeper level, because we talk, for 6 hours straight, but we're able to like, be out there in a, I don't even know where the closest populated city is. And it's just us. It's quiet. And like, it's one of those things where like, you really start to like appreciate things.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Thank you.
Actually, that's one of the things that you said that was impactful to you was never forget to stop and appreciate how far you've come. Yeah. And so you have come a far way. I know you're a wonderful husband to a beautiful wife named Alex. You're a dad to a little girl. You're an entrepreneur. You have your business and all of these things. And so, I think that's nice that that's part of what you do in terms of being able to appreciate how far you've come.
Yeah. And it's like one of those things that like, I think I do on a regular basis because I was so close to, spending a significant time in prison or dying. It's like, unfortunately, I think the number is up to like 50 something people that I've like known personally that have died from alcohol or drugs. And, like the statistics weren't in my favor.
Mm. Well, I'm glad that you're here with us today. We are going to swing into another little kind of fun part of what we do. And at Positive Recovery Centers, we use a lot of positive interventions. We do different types of kind of treatment modalities with our clients. And one of the things that we do is not different from anyone else, but we practice a lot of gratitude. And I know Dr. Powers adopted this in his own home. I've done it over the years with my kids, and some of our staff are doing it with theirs or with just spouses, depending upon what your life situation is at home. And so usually around the dinner table, I know Dr. Powers tells some great stories about 3 great things. Each of his children have to go around kind of saying 3 great things that happened to them in that day. And he has some fun stories that he tells about what that looks like. Over the years, my kids have said the craziest things about the great things that have happened to them. And so I was wondering if you might just share 3 great things that have happened to you this week. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the red plate tradition.
Yeah. So 3 great things. One was always I get to spend time with my wife and my baby girl. 2, we finally got a delivery date for a couch that we ordered 6 months ago. And 3, great thing, I got my hair cut.
Nice. So, and sometimes it is some of the most basic things. And I think when we do this around the table, that we can really appreciate what each other are kind of identifying as great things. And Dr. Powers, just from the standpoint of your experience with it, anything you would want to add to that?
I would encourage you to do it as your daughter grows up, because it's a great ritual that helps focus the brain on what's going right. Because kids know, hey, they're gonna ask me about this. This could be one of the things I bring to the table, or this or that. And it helps whether or not they're naturally, optimistic or not. Because Julie probably could tell you 100 great things that happened during the last 10 minutes. And so it wouldn't be a challenge. But if you have a different set point, a different sort of perspective, some people are just naturally pessimistic. They kind of see the world that way. And it's not always the healthiest. It's not always unhealthy, but it can help change the wiring of the brain so that you're a what's going right detective instead of what's going wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think fortunately I'm just like naturally that way. People, my friends and Alex and her friends always talk about it, that I just tend to have a really positive outlook on everything. And I think I've been that way since I was real little. I think that's just an inherent quality of mine. But it very rarely will you see me in a negative, pessimistic mood.
Yeah. So for our listeners that have kids that come home from school and you ask them how their day was and they're like, fine, or, this is just a great tool to utilize. And I myself have 3 children, and 2 of my 3 children could just rattle off without even thinking about it 3 great things that happened to them, and then 3 great things that are about to happen to them, all in the same breath. And then I have one that's always kind of a little bit more, just quieter and, doesn't want to draw attention to themselves and just, everything's good. So it's nice to kind of bring that to the table. Another thing that people have been doing lately, and actually this link just came up not too long ago for me. It was a reminder, but when I was doing some research around it, it's actually been a tradition since 1832. And a lot of families have adopted this into their family traditions. the red plate hack. It's kind of a heartfelt dinner time tradition that people have been adopting around the table. And it's really just to identify really easily someone who has something to celebrate, a spot at the table. So when you have other people in the house, kids, like Dr. Powers still has 2 kids at home, it makes it a little bit easier when you have kids that are at that age of kind of wanting to look at how we're celebrating and how we're identifying good things that are happening in their lives. And it's not always directly related to like a great report card or someone winning, you know, a sporting event. It can be anything. It's easy to do. It's a quick thing to do. And it really just helps to make sure that someone's achievement is being kind of looked at from many different ways in terms of how to celebrate another person. And so I've never done the red plate thing at my house. Back in the day when I had kids that were vying for attention, we used to have days. So like on the calendar, they would get to mark like today is Desi Day or Chelsea Day or Gia Day. And during that day, they knew they could like have what they wanted for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, where they kind of decided where we were going and the fun things that we were doing. So they kind of created their own self-celebrations. But the red plate kind of dinner night is one that, you know, siblings can kind of jump in and kind of identify things that they see in each other too, to suggest to the parents, you know, like tonight's a red plate kind of night for so-and-so. And I just think it's a good way of identifying the positive. So as we're looking for what's right, what's positive, that's something that's come to the table. So Dr. Powers introduced this to me, this red plate idea. So is there more that you would like to share with our listeners on the red plate?
I did not introduce you to it. You told me about it.
No, I swear the link came from you.
No, I have no idea what the red plate, I have no idea what it is. That's why when you brought it up.
This is awesome because we can have this debate. I'm going to have to send you back your text message.
Okay, I may have sent you the link because I saw it, but I've never used it.
So for our listeners, we're always looking for ways to create positivity because oftentimes in early recovery, families are trying to reconnect, but families are trying to figure out ways to kind of get back together. And this is just one way of doing that as well. Dr. Powers and I are always sending stuff back and forth with one another. So Clifton, you got any other things that you can give to us? Bring us something new?
I don't think we have any traditions.
So that's the time to create them. You and Alex and your beautiful baby daughter can start creating some of those family traditions for sure.
Definitely.
Well, I look forward to proof that I sent it to you for the first time because I thought you brought it up. But never mind that. Clifton Gillock of KICPOPS. Again, tell our listeners how they can order it. Do they do it on, what's the website?
So it's KICPOPS.com, KICPOPS.com.
Awesome. And they are so good. And there's no, I've got no financial interest in the company, but I am willing. I am willing for any kind of charity. I mean, they're so good. Thank you so much, Clifton, for joining us.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks, Clifton.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.